Welcome to today's Explainer. We're going to decode those invisible forces that basically dictate the prices of, well, almost everything we buy, sell, and consume. So, if you've ever found yourself wondering why the numbers on your local store's price tags behave the way they do, you are absolutely in the right place. Let's explore the mechanics of the market together, shall we?
Have you ever noticed how the prices of your favorite items will suddenly skyrocket one month, only to totally plummet a few weeks later? Honestly, it can feel completely arbitrary, right? Kind of like a roll of the dice, but it's actually not. What's really happening behind the scenes is this constant dynamic tug of war between the people buying and the people selling. And that invisible tug of war translates directly into real-world, everyday impacts on our wallets.
Okay, let's dive right into this. Here's our roadmap for today. First, we'll look at what happens when demand shifts, and then we'll flip it to see what happens when supply shifts. After that, we'll tackle simultaneous market changes, and finally, we'll wrap up with government market interventions. All right, Section 1. When demand shifts, the consumer's perspective. So think of it like this. When demand surges, it acts as this incredibly powerful gravitational pull upward. We don't just see a higher quantity of stuff being exchanged, the increased competition among buyers inherently drives the price up to a brand new equilibrium. Basically, by demanding more, consumers are effectively pulling the entire market to a higher price point and, you guessed it, a larger volume. But what actually triggers that demand to surge in the real world? It definitely doesn't happen by magic. According to the data, it really comes down to just a few key drivers. For instance, maybe our incomes increase, which allows us to buy more normal goods. Or maybe consumer preferences shift because, hey, a product suddenly becomes a huge viral trend. It could also just be that we expect the price of something to shoot up next month, so we all rush out to buy it today. And get this, even the prices of other items matter. If a product we usually buy alongside something else, what we call a complementary product, gets cheaper, well, our demand for the main product goes right up too. And this brilliantly illustrates one of the absolute most powerful triggers for a demand shift: substitute goods. The source material actually highlights this classic interaction between the markets for fish and meat. Just imagine, there's a sudden, super sharp increase in the price of meat. What happens next? Well, consumers who typically buy meat are going to look for a more affordable alternative, right? So they pivot over to the fish market. The meat market's price jump essentially acts as a catalyst, driving all those hungry consumers straight to the fish market. That instantly pushes the demand for fish outward, driving up both the price and the quantity of fish sold. It's crazy, but everything is totally interconnected.
Moving right along to Section 2. When supply shifts. This is the producer's perspective. Now, supply operates on a really fascinating inverse relationship compared to demand. A surge in supply basically floods the market. This expands the available quantity, sure, but it absolutely crushes the price. Things get cheaper and a lot more plentiful. On the flip side, a sudden shortage shrinks the available quantity, which ends up forcing buyers to bid the price up. So you can see how sellers exert a completely different kind of gravitational pull on the market than buyers do. So what causes supply to fluctuate back and forth like that? Well, just like consumers look at substitute goods, producers are always looking at alternative products. Think about a farmer who is currently growing wheat. If the market price for corn suddenly skyrockets, corn all of a sudden becomes a highly profitable alternative for them. That farmer might just decide to plant corn next season instead. And as a result, the supply of wheat decreases, which, you guessed it, drives up the price of wheat. Producers are literally constantly adjusting to changing financial constraints based on whatever alternative is the most profitable. Oh, before we move on, consider this really fascinating fact from the source material. Agricultural prices fluctuate way, way more than the prices of manufactured products. Why is that? Well, think about it. A factory producing smartphones can tightly control its assembly line to maintain a nice, steady supply. But agriculture? It's completely at the mercy of the weather, pests, and seasons. A sudden drought can violently swing that supply inward, causing massive, immediate price spikes. The inherent nature of the industry completely dictates how volatile its supply is going to be.
Okay, Section 3. Simultaneous market changes, the chaos of combined shifts.
Now, what's really interesting about this part is how we can actually decode these simultaneous shifts. Because out in the real world, when demand and supply move at the exact same time, we get 4 distinct combinations. It's like a collision of 2 massive market forces. I mean, demand can increase while supply also increases, or demand can increase while supply decreases, and so on.
The underlying logic behind all those combinations really comes down to predictable outcomes versus uncertain variables. Here is the secret to understanding this. When both forces move at the exact same time, one outcome, so either the final price or the final quantity, is going to be absolutely certain. But the other variable, it becomes completely uncertain. For example, if both demand and supply increase at the same time, we know for an absolute fact that the overall quantity exchanged in the market is going to increase. But the price? Honestly, that's uncertain. It totally depends on which shift was bigger. Did the huge surge in buyer demand push the price up more than the flood of new supply pushed it down? Without knowing the exact magnitudes of those shifts, the final price is basically a mystery.
Let's move on to Section 4, Government Market Interventions, or, as I like to call it, bending the rules. So the first way authorities step in and bend the rules is through price ceilings. And that literally just means legally setting a maximum allowable price in a given market. Governments will often do this to protect consumers from, extreme price spikes on essential goods. Think things like housing or staple foods. However, artificially capping a maximum price really disrupts that natural equilibrium we've been talking about. If the ceiling is set below where the natural market price actually wants to be, sellers just won't want to supply as much. But buyers, they're going to demand way more because, hey, it's artificially cheap. This kind of artificial disruption very often leads to immediate real-world shortages. Another really common intervention tool is a subsidy. This is essentially just a financial benefit paid directly by the government right to the suppliers. You can think of it as artificially lowering the producer's everyday costs. By changing the financial constraints of the supplier in this way, a subsidy effectively pushes supply outward. The main goal here is usually to encourage the production of something the government deems beneficial, like, say, renewable energy or local agriculture, basically just ensuring it remains super plentiful and affordable for the consumer. So the crucial point here is that interventions don't just happen through price caps and financial handouts. They also happen through penalties. The source material outlines a great example of this, the incidence of an excise tax on cigarettes. When a government slaps a really heavy tax on a product, it basically acts as an artificial increase in the cost of production. This forces the supply inward, which raises the final price for the consumer and decreases the overall quantity sold. The core rules of supply and demand are still functioning, for sure, but they're being deliberately manipulated by taxes to discourage people from consuming certain goods. Which brings us to the ultimate question underlying all of this economic architecture we've looked at today. After seeing how naturally buyers and sellers push and pull to find that perfect equilibrium, and then seeing exactly how easily those rules can be bent by outside forces, we really have to ask ourselves, should markets be left entirely alone to find their own natural balance, or is government intervention a strictly necessary tool to protect the public and shape a better society? It is the great debate of modern economics, and now you have the framework to understand exactly what's at stake. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and hey, keep questioning the forces shaping the world around you.